What the Tech is brought to you by Harry's. Stop messing around and get started shaving with Harry's today by claiming your free trial offer. $13 value for free, just covers shipping by going to harrys.com/whatthetech. TextExpander helps you communicate smarter. Visit textexpander.com/podcast for 20% off your first year.
What's the tech?
Everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zanik. Of course, I'm joined by Mr. Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good.
We're back on a Tuesday. Life, as we know it, will go back to how it used to be, to a simpler time now.
We'll see.
I surely hope so. Well, for the last year, we've been rushing through these shows, but today we are back to, taking our time. If we need it to be an hour, it'll be an hour 15, maybe an hour 15. Let's get crazy here, Paul. We could have it be whatever we want it to be. And to celebrate, I am having a Pilsner here right now. I don't know what it is. My intern opened it up, and he said, you need this today, because I was screaming at him.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is what we're doing. How you been?
Too bad.
Not too bad. After we did the show last week, there was a nice little article you put out, and it was some information on the ARM-based computers we're going to be getting. Microsoft finally documents the limitations of Windows 10 on ARM, which I am very excited to talk to you about. Okay. Before we go on, am I a little too excited about this?
About Windows 10 on ARM?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the issue with this stuff for me is that there's this enthusiast base of people, like, tech enthusiasts, in this case, like Microsoft or Windows enthusiasts, who want this thing to be like the be-all, end-all, whatever. And I think what we lose sight of is that this is for normal people. Like, this stuff is going to make life better for normal people, And so they look at some of the limitations here, like, oh, I can't use this to create, apps in Visual Studio or play games or whatever. And it's like, right, it's fine. It's not supposed to be that kind of thing, So, no, you're right to be enthusiastic about it. It's hitting at the mainstream of the market. Like, this is going to benefit a very wide group of people.
This is also a tremendous change. This is a game changer in the sense that we have another player in this world when it comes to PC chip makers. When it comes to CPUs, it's no longer Intel and AMD. Right.
I mean, the way you might want to frame it is that every once in a while something comes along and changes everything, and it forces the market leaders, in this case we're talking primarily about Intel, to rethink the way they do things and hopefully make improvements. So we saw that with AMD, which innovated with the x64 platform that is now the basis for all modern PCs. Intel wanted to go with this Titanium thing, which was a huge, steaming pile of crap. So that was kind of a nice little reset. And then in this case, what we see is Qualcomm coming to Windows, meaning that we're going to have systems that were designed from the ground up for power management and battery life and instant connectivity and the ability to switch between different network types and so forth. So, look, if Qualcomm fails, if the ARM thing fails, and the best thing that happens is that Intel's chips get better as a result,
I'll take that.
We're all going to win. Yeah. It's still a win.
Yeah. I want to talk about this in detail, and I also want to talk about the latest leaked information on the Samsung Galaxy S9 that I'm very excited about, because that will be my Android phone for the next, year or so. I want to talk about that and a whole lot more. But before we do, I want to thank our sponsor, and that's TextExpander. These guys are awesome. I don't know if you've heard of them, Smile Software. They've been around for a while. They make some great stuff. But another thing that they make is TextExpander, and it helps you communicate smarter. I've been using this thing for... it's funny. I was talking to John Sungas, and he was telling me about, I would really benefit if I had some sort of shortcutting app where I could hit a letter, because I constantly type the same exact thing over and over and over again all day long. I mean, literally with my day job and my business, I'm essentially typing a lot of the same stuff every day. So I've created these hotkeys or snippets where I just hit one letter and it fills in the entire thing. And this is what Text Expander helps you do. You could create snippets out of things that you send repeatedly, like directions, mailing addresses, meeting agendas, website URLs, common sales responses, common support replies. Think about how great that is. When it comes to automation, everything is going to bots, but there's something to be said about having a person there. And if you were able to, let's say, with a support reply, just hit a letter and you automatically send this reply that you know it's going to help them, this is the way to do it. You could do reference requests, name you find difficult to spell. Some people may find my last name very difficult to spell. It's quite possible. Paul, you still can't say it, right?
What's that?
My last name.
Yo.
You can summon
Zandarian.
You could summon your snippets in any app on the Mac, iPad, iPhone, and Windows using a quick search by typing the custom abbreviations that you've set up. And this is a great offer that they have. You go to textexpander.com/podcast and you get 20% off your first year. You could also, they have a bunch of examples there. Like right now I'm looking at Text Expander in Law. And it's showing you how you would benefit if you were, and it's all on their website. If you go to textexpander.com and they have a section where it says entries and Text Expander -in-law-QA-session, you could actually see how this would be implemented in a scenario like that. This is great software made by great guys. I've been running it on this Mac since they signed on, and you know what? It's made my life easier, and it gets smarter because the more you use it, the more stuff you put in. It's phenomenal. TextExpander.com/podcast for 20% off your first year. I want to thank Text Expander for supporting the show. You know, years of doing this, and Paul, I mean, you have a phenomenal voice. I mean, you really do. It's a beautiful
face for radio. Is that what you're trying to say?
Beautiful voice, and you have that presence. And I never thought I do. I think I'm a little New York nasally, like a little Long Island nasally. And I get people that come to me and they're like, "No, you have a great voice for radio."
Yeah, I think so.
I think I've trained myself a little bit, but do you know what I cannot get rid of? That New York nonsense. I can't say percent without having to think about it. It's percent.
What do you want to?
Percent.
10%
off. What? Hey, Vinny. What's the discount on that? 20%? Or we like to call it points, Paul.
You know what? I would be true to yourself. I mean, I think the regionalisms are one of the things that make people special. I mean, I wouldn't be so quick to become generic.
Thank you. You know what? I needed that from you today.
Seriously.
That was a nice pick-me-up. And with that said, somebody on YouTube at this moment is writing, "They don't get to the content until about 10 minutes, 53 seconds. Skip ahead if you want to hear anything."
I hear you, sure.
I do want to talk about this. So Windows finally documents the limitations of ARM on Windows 10. Yep. You published this on February 17th, which was late last week. And this is the first time that we actually got details as far as how this is going to work. And this is very interesting. I was actually with my buddy Bob at press at the bar. We actually, when the article came out, we were reading it together. He's like, "Oh, you saw Paul put this thing out?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then we were talking about this because he's in IT. So I kind of want to go down this list, and I want to get your opinion.
So before we go through the list, I just want to frame this as well, which is that there are three things that I think people kind of commingle and confuse. Windows 10S is one of them.
Okay.
Windows 10 on ARM is another one. Okay. And then always connected PC is another one.
So then people are blending this.
Yeah, like these things do interrelate. There's no doubt about it. But it doesn't mean, for example, that you buy an ARM-based PC in the future and that it is running Windows 10S. Not necessarily, right? Windows 10 on ARM is not a version of Windows. Windows 10 on ARM is a platform. It's just another place that Windows 10 runs. There will be Windows 10 Pro on ARM. There will be Windows 10 Home on ARM. Yeah, Windows 10 Enterprise.
Okay.
Whatever.
So to be clear, Windows 10S will be on ARM, but this is not what we are talking about.
It's not the only thing.
It's not the only thing on ARM.
It's not the only.
You know what? I didn't even think of that when I read this article, but you're absolutely right. There could be a tremendous amount of confusion over this.
I think the reason why you want to list limitations in this system is that Microsoft likes to position Windows 10 as just being this thing, and it runs wherever you put it. In this case, Intel, AMD, obviously, and then um, on ARM. And there are different versions of Windows 10. There are different product editions of Windows 10. They all have their own capabilities and limitations and whatever. And so what this really means is that there will be different product editions of Windows 10 running on ARM. If that product edition supports a certain feature on Intel, it may not support, in some cases, that feature on ARM.
On ARM. Okay.
Because of limitations in the software. And by the way, I think some of these things are going to change over time.
Some of these I imagine to be changed quite quickly too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a work in progress thing going on here. So the first version will be. It's not like they're shipping something that's like a beta. I wouldn't worry about it that way. But I do. When I look at this list, I see a couple of things that are going to change.
So let's go down this. So here's one. 64-bit apps will not work.
64-bit. Well, actually, it's 64-bit. Across the board.
Across the board, yeah.
So ARM, Windows 10 on ARM is a 64-bit operating system, which is a little confusing.
But it cannot run 64-bit applications.
Right, and that is defined very broadly. It cannot run 64-bit Windows desktop applications.
Yeah.
It cannot run 64-bit store applications if those are a thing. It cannot run 64-bit. I guess it would be a thing. So 64-bit ARM apps will not run on Windows 10 on ARM in the beginning. That's one thing that will change, by the way.
So here's my question to you. When I read this, I'm saying x64 applications, the traditional Windows desktop applications. Now, we're not talking about universal applications, right?
We are, actually.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did not.
Yeah, I'd have to bring up the store and look. I actually don't know off the top of my head how these things always work, because when you create an app for the store, I'm just going to look at one to see what it looks like.
Does it? Do you have to create both and it allocates?
Well, you have your option, right? You as the developer can decide which platforms you're targeting explicitly. And if this thing would just load, I could scroll down. Here we go. So this really doesn't provide. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah. So Netflix for the Windows Store requires x64. You actually have to be able to run. You have to have a 64-bit version of Windows to run the Netflix app that is a store app. Let me bring up another one because I'm not really sure how universal that is. Spotify is x86 required, right?
Okay.
So that doesn't mean it won't run on an x64 system. It means it won't run natively on an ARM system. It's designed for Intel-based PCs, but it should run on Windows 10 on ARM.
So is the reason for this their emulation, their hardware emulation, where it's
well, you know what? Let's not worry. So that's in this case maybe, but let's not. Oh, I'm sorry. You mean on the Qualcomm side?
On the Qualcomm side, yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, if you're running an ARM-based PC right now, which you're not, they're not out yet. But if you were, it's running on its own architecture, and it can emulate apps, Windows desktop apps. It can also run Windows Store apps, right? These are two different things. If it's an x86 Windows Store app, it can emulate it, and that should work, but slowly. But an app developer has the opportunity to target different platforms. And so, for example, I haven't found one yet, but maybe because it's just not common. And the type of thing this would have targeted in the past would have been like Windows Phone. So Facebook. It's not a good example because it doesn't work this way, but it's possible that Facebook could have made different ARM and x86 versions of the app and put them in the store. And then the store, when you load it on your PC, will look at the kind of PC you have. It will determine which apps to show you, and you would get the ARM version.
Yeah,
because that would be the one that would run best on your system. It's not something you have to choose as a user. Okay. The point behind this, by the way, is that you don't have to think about it, right? So I think it was Netflix is x64. I don't think you're going to see that on ARM. I think it would automatically hide it from you if it can't run. That's the way the system's supposed to work.
Okay.
Right. Now, in the future, because it is a 64-bit operating system, Microsoft will support running 64-bit ARM applications on the system, probably in the next version of Windows 10, like in the fall. 64-bit desktop applications, I'm not really sure. But just to kind of put it in perspective, Microsoft Office, probably the most popular desktop app for most people, is generally available in the 32-bit x86 version. That's what most people are running. They do actually have an x64 version, but it's very unusual. Also, Microsoft has just put Office in the store. The store versions of Office are x86 as well.
Okay.
So those will work fine on ARM.
Okay. So the other part of this is that certain classes of applications will not run, like anything that modifies the user interface, like shell extensions, input method editors, assisted technologies, or cloud and cloud storage apps.
Yeah, so just to be clear, what that means is there are applications like Dropbox, Google Drive, and of course OneDrive. Although OneDrive's built into Windows, you don't have to worry about that one. But if OneDrive were not in Windows, those applications hook into the operating system at such a level where you can't emulate it. It just doesn't work. So if you wanted to sync your Dropbox files to one of these systems, right now you can't. They would have to create an ARM-based desktop app for that syncing.
Which I'm sure they're going to work on that.
Well, it depends on how popular this thing is. This will be a little bit of a limitation for people. I would say this is kind of a legit one. I do think it's going to happen over time. The question is whether that happens because Microsoft builds the support into the OS, which would be the most seamless way to do it, or because for some reason these things are so popular that the Google Drives, the Dropboxes, the Boxes, or whatever of the world all decide to natively create, ARM desktop apps. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine right now, but I guess it could happen.
Yeah.
I think the support's going to come from Microsoft because when you look at some of these other things, like the input method editors and the other assistive technologies, that's going to be a sore spot for some people. And that's the type of thing that needs to be natively supported by the operating system. So my expectation is that this changes over time and that software developers won't have to do anything. I bet it just works.
So x86, it cannot use x86 drivers.
Yeah, and this is interesting here because this is one of those differences between Windows 10s and Windows 10 on ARM, right? Even though Windows 10s might be a thing on ARM, it's actually Windows 10 whatever in S mode, but whatever. This is one of those things, some people this seems obvious, some people it's not so clear, but when you install a driver on Windows 10, you're essentially, the installer is of course a Windows application of some kind. It's a desktop application. The driver itself is very much like a file, something will hook into the file system. It's a low-level bit of code that is native to the platform. So, I guess what this, how do I explain this? Like if you had an HP printer of some kind, and you plugged it into the computer, it should just work across any kind of computer. Windows 10 meaning. So
because
Windows 10s.
It's built into Windows. The driver support is built in.
That's right. It uses what's called a class driver. Basic functionality should just work. If that driver doesn't just work, you're never going to be able to get it to work on ARM. If you wanted to use the like a utility application that would make it print better, print to the edges, do whatever you want to use glossy
scanner, Apple, whatever it is. Yeah.
Actually, that might work, the application. The problem is that the bundle that you get for those things typically includes a driver in addition.
For each part, yeah.
The driver's not going to work. So it's not clear how this thing will fail or not when you try to install it. This is kind of a gray area right now. I guess the point is, if you plug the thing in and it works, that's as good as it's ever going to work as a driver. Okay. But you might still be able to install a third-party application to take advantage of
So when I read this, I got a couple emails and a couple messages saying, oh, man, here's Windows 2000 and Windows Vista all over again. And I said, well, no, because at that point, that driver support natively within the OS was almost non-existent. I mean,
it's way better than it used to be.
Oh, it was tiny at that point.
But Windows 10s on Intel today, it provides us with a little bit of a preview of what this might look like. So, for example, Microsoft makes something called a Surface Precision Mouse. It's kind of gray and styled like the Surface devices.
The pretty
it's
one.
It's Bluetooth-based. Yeah, it's nice. It's ergonomic. If you use that on Windows 10s, it works instantaneously. But the software to configure the mouse, maybe you want to, well, actually, that's a little too basic. There's basic mouse configuration stuff in Windows. But if you want to do things like it has 5 buttons on it or whatever the number is, and you can determine what each one does if you press it or scroll on it or whatever, that software is a desktop application, and you cannot install it on Windows 10s. because Windows 10s only installs store apps, right? So you actually can't use that mouse to the extent of its capabilities on Windows 10s. Now, on Windows 10 on ARM, regardless of what version it is, well, actually, if it was in S mode, it wouldn't work, right? Because we just demonstrated that it would never work. But if you had Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Home running on ARM, would that application install, and would it let you interact with the features of the mouse and configure it in certain ways? I actually think it would, but it depends on whether or not that package includes its own driver. In other words,
okay.
Yeah, to configure the mouse features, do you need more than the class drivers that are built into Windows? If you do, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So this is still, it's a gray area. It's not 100% clear what will happen. People are going to get these devices. They're going to try things. We're going to find out. But this is the way they're describing it.
So the other thing, no Hyper-V.
Right. So the virtualization platform that's available in Windows 10 Pro and Windows 10 Enterprise is not available.
I wasn't expecting it to be available, to be honest. I mean,
no. Look, it's ludicrous to think this would work. So Hyper-V is a bare metal solution. It's designed specifically for Intel class hardware. It is one thing for an ARM chipset to be able to emulate Windows 10 code, or Windows code, I should say. It is an entirely another thing to expect it to host a virtualization environment inside of which you will be running an Intel-based PC.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And the other thing you got to remember is that, especially for the first generation of these devices, they're not going to be high-end devices. These are not workstation computers. They're thin, light, always connected PCs. They're designed to work with wireless, including cellular connectivity, excellent battery life, whatever. And these computers are going to have 4 gigabytes of RAM, usually, at the most. They're going to have small amounts of storage. This is not, you don't run Hyper-V on this platform. This is not, it's not a workstation. So, it makes sense.
So I got a question here, actually, from our Twitch chat room. If you're watching this live, head on over to our Twitch chat room. If you're on gfqlive.tv, you could just refresh it and it'll pop up. It was cached for some reason at the beginning of the show. You can sign up for Twitch and join there and join the conversation there. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we're switching to Twitch for the chat. One being that we're a partner with them now, which is phenomenal. 2, there's a lot of incentives for the chat. It makes it a lot more fun with you guys. I gotta get all the information before I start yapping away about this. But if you're in the chat room, go over there, join the Twitch chat room, sign up, and join the chat room there. It's also a lot easier for us to maintain. The IRC chat room, shockingly, was costing us money. And the downtime, it was constantly going down for us. So we decided to make the jump and see how this goes. So Frosty Winnipeg, I wonder if he's a friend in Canada. It'd be funny if it's like, no, Winnipeg, El Salvador, not Canada. He's asking if an app is written specifically for ARM, is it still a PWA in Windows on ARM?
So a PWA is a web app, so it would never be written for ARM, right?
Okay.
I assume he probably means UWP.
Maybe he means UWP.
So let's say that. Ask it again in the context.
Okay.
Say it with UWP.
If an app is written specifically for ARM, is it still a UWP in Windows on ARM?
Yeah. So you, as the developer, have the option to decide which platforms you're going to support. There's, to date, it's been things like Windows 10. PC, x86 or x64 or both, Windows Phone, which obviously is out of favor, HoloLens, Surface Hub, Windows 10 IoT, but now we're adding Windows 10 on ARM, and in the beginning it will be ARM x86 and eventually be ARM x64 as well, and those will be store apps. If you just target ARM x86, let's say in the beginning, because for some reason you only want your app to run on these PCs, this app will only be shown to those people who have these PCs. You will never see it on an Intel PC. I don't think anyone would do that. Why would you limit, your audience that way? But yes, if you wanted to, you could create a UWP in the near future that only ran on ARM.
So it's fascinating because another thought is, if this is successful, right, and they get their stuff together on ARM and they're noticing, tremendous battery life, which we should get tremendous battery life from the get-go. Can this be almost a gateway into possibly entering the phone market again for Microsoft? I love to speculate on this because the sheer amount of messages that I get regularly from people saying, "Man," and I think it's very niche, right? Because of who you are and the show that we do, and I think we are the very small group of people that actually has a percentage of Windows Phone users. You know, not just a dollop. I'm talking maybe a couple points here, but can this possibly, be like a reignite?
Right. No, but the way I sort of think of this is Microsoft very clearly believes that there's innovation that can occur in the mobile market, and that their contribution to that is not going to be a phone as we think of it today, right? It's not going to be yet another attempt to compete with the Androids or the iPhones of the world. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But these rumors we've heard of, things like Andromeda and Polaris, suggest that Microsoft is working on what I would call a hybrid mobile device that kind of sits somewhere between a phone and a tablet, or a phone and a PC or whatever, and that this thing may or may not have a clamshell design with the two screens or one screen, and we don't know. I mean, there's a lot of rumors, but there's a confluence of things happening. Support for Qualcomm or ARM hardware on the hardware side, support for PWA in the store, which will open up all Windows users, but also maybe users of some new device we don't know about yet, to a new generation of better and more apps, which is important. The always connected PC stuff, which isn't tied just to ARM, but I think we'll see its best results on ARM, which will result in incredibly good battery life, excellent standby, and seamless connectivity, right, between cellular and Wi-Fi type networks. And then the simplification of Windows, right, which we've seen half steps to through such things as Windows RT, Windows Mobile 10, and then Windows in S mode, as I'll call it now, Windows 10S, right? So these things all together kind of hint at there could be this platform in the future, and it could be simplified, and it could be mobile, and it could be seamlessly connected, and yada yada. You get the idea. But there's no version of the story where Microsoft suddenly jumps up with something new and is successful against two app stores that have billions of apps, billions of downloads each year, and billions of users. There's no version of that story. It just doesn't. It's just never going to happen. Windows has the unfortunate byproduct of decades of not just legacy technology, but also just being a work thing. There are very few people who use Windows devices to read and to watch movies and to play. Well, play games obviously is a different thing, but to play mobile games, casual games. It's just not where we go for that kind of stuff. And so I think there is a future there. I think it's important, and I think it's productivity based, and it's going to be tilted a little more to the PC than it is to the phone.
Yeah, very interesting. I want to go into I want to talk about the Samsung Galaxy S9 for a little bit, but before I do, I want to remind everybody, guys, go on over to Thurrott.com. Join the premium service. Paul does a tremendous amount of premium content, including a podcast with Brad every day. Also, you guys do it on Fridays as well, which is open for everybody. Special blog posts, forum support, all this extra stuff. Did you guys announce that extra thing, the thing that you guys were going to announce, or no, not yet? I don't know. You had said that you guys were going to announce some new revamp or something.
Oh, yeah. No, not yet.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, we met in New York recently.
Yeah.
I think is what you're.
Okay.
Yeah. Not yet.
But go on over there and check it out. Also, we're going to be doing our bonus shows again. So please sign up for our Patreon page, patreon.com/whatthetech. That's patreon.com/whatthetech. Go fund us, and you get these bonuses. We're revamping that in the coming weeks, but continue to fund us and help us out while we continue to provide this show. It's many years running at this point. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. Samsung Galaxy S9. Paul, I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, I mean, last year's devices were excellent, right? The S8, the S8 Plus, and then, of course, the Note 8. And,
I had an S6 and an S7, and I could tell you the S6 by far was a much better phone, in my opinion, than the S7. My S7
Yeah.
kind of fell apart very quickly. Within a year, it was almost unusable. And a lot of that has to do with apps and the way that the apps are written, you know,
Right. Right.
for Android. But it just bad experience, man. And I skipped on the S8 because I knew that it was just a small tweak. But the S9, again, very, you know, as far as visually, it's almost the same. But
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are a couple features that I really, really, really like.
Yeah.
One
All right. So
being,
what are they? Because to me, I look
yeah,
at this thing, and the one thing I see is, you move the fingerprint reader, fine,
yeah,
obvious. But by and large, I would say there's nothing really surprising here, right? It
yeah,
looks and seems to be a lot like its predecessors. So what stands out here
the
for you?
camera,
Yeah.
the camera. They're saying from all the reports, which it'll come, I think Sunday, right? Sunday they're doing the
Was it that
announcement.
quick?
I think it's
Yeah.
Sunday, the announcement. Uh,
Okay.
it has an f1.5 and an f2.4 aperture
Right.
lens. So the f1.5 being for low light or macro shots, and then the f2.4 when you want a scene, when you want the scene more in focus. This
Okay.
is very interesting. And the S9 Plus's secondary rear camera would be locked at f2.4. And it would be intended for more of a zoomed in or portrait shot. So f2.4 is, I
Yeah.
mean, the bokeh effect on that naturally should be very good.
I'm surprised we haven't seen more advancement with optical zoom, right? Remember, about a year and a half ago, Apple added 2x optical zoom to the iPhone 7 Plus. And when you look at the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 10, same thing. They have not touched that. It's never advanced. And then, of course, Samsung and most of the big Android phone makers have gone to dual camera systems, except for Google, oddly, but Google uses math because they're geniuses, I guess, to arrive at different effects. You can have black, like the Huawei phone that I'm testing right now has a black and white lens, which is kind of amazing. It takes astonishing monochrome shots. But they'll usually use the lenses together, like you're saying, to do things like portrait modes or bokeh effects and all this kind of stuff. And it seems, and that's where the advances always seem to be. For the past 2-3 years, whatever, is the camera, and it's specifically with dual cameras, right?
I mean, the dual
So
camera,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but I'd still, one of the things I really liked about this goes back 5 years now when Nokia at the time announced the Lumia 1020 was massive megapixels, right? And the ability to really zoom in on images that you took and automatic bokeh effect was just astonishing. Although I think today's phones obviously do a great job with that stuff too. But, I went to Europe that summer and I have many pictures that were taken at great distance. Like I would go up to the top of a church, take a shot down at the ground, and just the depth effect that you got from that was very notable. I'd love to see the impact of optical zoom on a dual camera system. How amazing that might be. I mean, I don't know anything about the science.
Something else that's I was thinking about the other day when I was reading this news, and I think a lot of our viewers probably have noticed it too, is the slowdown in growth of megapixels. And for the longest time, you and I have always said it's not always about the megapixels, guys. The optics go way farther than the megapixels, but
you need a certain number of megapixels, right, just to make it make sense. But I mean,
it seems like we've been coasting at this 12 megapixel level at this point.
Well, but this is like calories, Andrew. Like not all calories are created equal. Not all pixels are created. No, I mean it's there is the notion of big pixels, right? There are different things going on. I mean, if you look at not just Apple, Samsung's doing this, Google's doing this, Huawei, I'm sure, is doing that. I've got to talk to them. I'm not really sure 100% what they do, but OnePlus, everyone is doing this. I mean, they're really improving the core capabilities of the camera lenses, and by having multiple lenses, the way that those lenses can work together. And it has a far bigger impact than just size of the image. The quality of the pixels counts. And I think that's the bigger advance. And I think these companies do a pretty good job of explaining this, right? It's not, 12 megapixels, 16, 20, whatever the number is. A lot of these things today, they fall in on the low end of that scale, but the pictures that these things take are amazing.
Tremendous. I mean, even listen, I have an iPhone 7 Plus here. right? I'm able to take some beautiful, beautiful photos with this thing.
Sure.
And I mean, I have a DSLR as well that I use for the kids and stuff like that. But to be honest, I'm better off, snapping a photo with this camera with the kids than actually using a DSLR because, you got to work that thing a little bit to get the photo that you want.
Right.
Even you could put on auto mode, but you're not going to get the results that you kind of anticipate from a $2,000 camera. It's fascinating, and the fact that you're able to do tremendous aperture modes, f1.5 and f2.4 being. I'm curious to see how well that does. Really, I really want to see how well this camera does because I don't think they're competing with the iPhone at this point when it comes to camera quality. The reality is, and Samsung, yeah, I don't think so.
I don't know.
I think they're competing with Google because the fact that the Pixel has such a high rating when it comes to the camera, I'm honestly surprised by it.
Well, it has a single camera. That's what
and
makes
it's a
it
single
impressive.
Camera,
right?
yeah.
I mean, imagine if Google ever gets their hands on a dual camera system, what could happen there? I mean, we'll see. But look, all of these phones, whether it's a Samsung flagship, a Google flagship, an Apple flagship, whatever, the goal here should always be the same thing, which is that a normal person can turn the camera on, take a picture, and have it come out in some way that is just astonishingly good. And, in my own experience, I went up through the various Nexus phones, Nexus 6P, most recently, and then the first Google Pixel, and now the second Google Pixel. For whatever problems these phones might have had, and they've certainly had problems, you take pictures and you're like, gee, like this is like in many cases it almost looks better than the real life thing you're looking at. I took some pictures in low light the other night when it started snowing out in front of my house. It's not a particularly interesting scene, but there's just something about the quality of the photo that the thing takes where you look at. It's probably on Instagram.
All right, let me
see. It could be on Facebook.
Let me see. I'm going to take a look at it.
Actually, the one I didn't put up was I had taken 2 photos in a row just outside, and then Google turned it into a panorama, which is astonishing because it just looks really nice.
My wife is giving me bizarre looks. Can I help you? She's giving me like the creepiest, creepy look. Like
She's
that,
on
yeah.
to you.
Yeah, she is on to me, and she has my kid, and they're both giving me the same bizarre look. Jeez. I don't even know what to say at that. It's very uncomfortable, Jess. No, I think it's amazing how the quality has improved, but the reality is, real world experience, right?
Yep.
What's going to take the best photo in reality? We see all these iPhone, even with their app. So here's a question for you.
Any professional guy with any reasonable
with
camera is
enough
going to be able
lighting.
to take a good picture. What I'm talking about is I want my mother to be able to hold the thing up and click and just have it come out.
And not be blurry.
And I actually think most of these phones do a pretty good job of that, frankly. You shouldn't have to screw with settings. That was one of the things like the iPhone 7 Plus I didn't like was you couldn't just say, just do an auto HDR thing. You had to kind of turn HDR on. And it was like, no, just always make it the best it can be. Just do that,
Is there a reason why it doesn't do that?
I don't know. I think the newer ones actually do that. Google has gotten very aggressive with HDR because people like those kind of vibrant photos, and so auto HDR is on by default on their phones, and they've gotten even a little more vibrant, I think, over time, just because that's what people like. But it should be an option. I just want to go in and just leave this thing on.
Yeah. I'm looking at. There's a whole bunch of hands-on reviews on this phone already. It's amazing how these things leak out. The other thing was the battery life. There was a nice little. Yes, sir.
You should go to Instagram.
Yeah.
And Mary Jo Foley just posted a thing that's on the top of my Instagram, and she has a Nexus 6P. This is a phone that's
what's her
2 years old.
Mary
MJ Foley 99.
Foley.
That's a beautiful photo.
Let me see. Instagram.com/MJFoley99 of the
eggs.
The
with
ramen.
The noodles.
Yeah, that is a beautiful photo. What did she take?
Amazing, right? Nexus 6P.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's a great photo. And that's what I mean. She doesn't have to be a professional photographer. The phone just has to do the work for her, and it's amazing when you get a picture like that.
And you get just enough light, you get the proper light.
You don't have to worry about light. That's the thing about that phone. Low light, no problem.
Yeah.
The iPhone that came out that year could never have handled that photo. The iPhone that came out this year wouldn't handle it as good either, actually. But
God, that's actually a beautiful photo with the color popping.
Yeah,
it's actually a great bowl of ramen too.
Yep, it's a nice little meal there.
Did she make this?
I don't know.
Yeah, she did make this actually. Wow, she posted the recipe too.
Yeah, it's a great
I have
shot.
no idea. Can you get the dog and please, thank you. I'm working here. This isn't playtime. I mean, you're more than welcome to come back here at this point. The show has been totally disrupted. Just totally come in. It's fine. Here we go. So the dog is here. The baby's crying. Jess is trying to wrangle the dog and can't because the dog is now under my desk and he's dragging all the cables. Oh, Jesus Christ. You're worse than the kids. You know? We sent my daughter to daycare so I could do the show. I think she needs to go to daycare as well. And the dog. This is why I drink, Paul. This is why. Here's a question for you. You have the... we were talking earlier, and you are going to buy a Mac. You're going to buy a Mac, finally. You're going to buy a MacBook or
Well, no,
Pro.
I have a Mac. I've always had a Mac. I mean, my point is I want to get a more modern Mac. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the current standoff? Because you're probably hanging on for the same reason that I ended up having to get my wife a new 13-inch MacBook Pro.
Right. And
yesterday I was trying to do just minor Photoshop on this thing. Very little. I had to edit a photo. And I forgot how miserable a dual core is.
Interesting.
I have to tell you, that 13-inch dual core i5, oof, not that great.
So, I have so many problems with the Mac. I don't even know where to start. But if you just look at like the modern devices, the MacBook is too small and has an M3 processor. The MacBook Air is 4 generations out of date. The thing that bugs me about the MacBook Air is that if you look at that device, it would be so easy to turn that into something sweet right now. Imagine a 14-inch screen instead of a 13-inch screen in the same panel with smaller bezels. Imagine just having a modern chipset in that thing. The latest Intel chipset with a quad-core processor, the option to have 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, a Retina display, obviously, in the 14-inch, I would say. I've just described an incredible computer that Apple refuses to make.
Yeah,
it's astonishing, and there's nothing wrong with that the form factor. It is still beautiful. It's got a beautiful wedge shape. It seems thinner than it is because of that kind of wedge, design where it gets to a point at the front. It's beautiful. I don't know what their problem is. It's never going to happen. It's my fantasy. It doesn't matter. And then you get to the MacBook Pros, and there's a bunch of things I don't like there. But the trackpad is way too big. The keyboard is too clicky and loud. Doesn't have enough travel.
It's very clicky and loud, and it tends to get louder. But I have to tell you,
it's very unreliable. By the way, you get a little piece of a crumb under a key, and the whole keyboard stops working.
Jess's shift key is locked, and she's had it for almost 2 weeks now, 3 weeks, because I don't know what's underneath that thing.
You can't get it out
because I can't even pop it out. I'm afraid to pop the thing out.
You can't. You do. You script the whole keyboard. You have to replace the whole thing. It's a whole keyboard swap. It's the only way you can do it.
Yeah.
It's a disaster. So there's that. The touch bar, which is nonsense. And the thing I don't understand is on the MacBook 13, on the lowest configuration, you can get it without a touch bar.
Why can't you get it on the higher one? Yeah.
But that's it. On the MacBook 15, you can't get it without the touch bar. And I would think that the professionals who require that kind of a machine would be among the audience that do not want the touch bar.
I'm going to tell you the worst part of this, okay, with this touch bar. I'm not annoyed by the trackpad anymore at all. First, for a long time, I said it's a little too big. It's a little too big. It doesn't bother me. I'm not affected by it because the cornering is really smart on this. Yep. So it kind of knows, like if my palm is touching on the sides, it won't do anything.
Okay.
So it's actually really smart. But where it is not smart is, so when I'm typing, I tend to extend my pinky a little bit. So let's say I'm typing something with an E or an R or a T, right? My pinky will always kind of touch the top, and it'll hit the touch bar. And it'll always hit escape or back or search any type of URL in Chrome or any other browser. And it constantly erases what I've done. Or kicks me off, and I'm typing away, and I don't even realize it. I think what it needs is some sort of sensitivity control where it knows, like, when you're actually touching it. It's actually really dumb how it works. It's very sensitive.
My cat has decided to show up and interrupt the podcast.
Well,
I apologize.
Is it more of an interruption than my dog and my daughter and my son?
But there's been a weird switch over at my house where the cats have finally decided that the dog is not a threat, and now they're just coming downstairs and
that's awesome.
They're just interrupting everything. Anyway, but you know,
that's my biggest problem with this.
The Mac also escalates in price really dramatically, and I'd like to, I've had the MacBook Air probably for 4 years ish. I'd like something that's going to last a while because it's not my primary computer, but again, like I kind of want to keep up on what's going on that side of the fence, obviously, and I want to do it on modern hardware. One of the big limitations of the MacBook Air, even though, by the way, it's still pretty solid, it's kind of, for what it is, like, it works really well. The biggest limitation is the Retina screen. You can't have one. So 1440 by 900.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't mind it, but you can't. There's a lot of stuff going on with like display scaling and so forth. It's just not an option on the MacBook Air. You don't have any way to access that stuff, and of course you can't have more than 8 gigs of RAM either. It's just like basically a single configuration. So it's kind of limited. On the MacBook Pro, you could start with something like a MacBook Pro 13 with no touch bar. You could go up to 16 gigs of RAM. I think what I just described costs $1,600. I think, 256, 16 gigs of RAM is a lot of money. MacBook Pro 15 with basically the same configuration, you'd have to have a touch bar, is over $2,000 or about $2,000.
Yeah,
it's a lot of money.
Cheap. It is a lot of money. It is.
And you can save a couple hundred by going refurbished, but then you get into a situation where you're spending $1,400 or more. $1,400.
It's a lot of money
on a refurbished computer.
Yeah.
Right.
There isn't. These are not really good machines to be moved every day. That's another part of this.
Okay. Well,
which I have to tell you, and I'm not a guy that beats up their computer, but I'm starting to notice that it's getting a little funky.
Okay. Well, there's too many things wrong with this for me to even consider this right now. So, as is so often the case, you kind of look at what's coming next and you think, well, because obviously I can just use the computer I have. That would be the cheapest thing imaginable. Don't spend any money. So I can do that, obviously, and I will do that. And I'm looking forward to potentially to see what they do with the MacBook Pro this year, if anything, right? I'd like to see them rev that again. Quad-core processors would be an obvious choice. Maybe make some changes with regards to the touch bar, yada, yada. We'll see. But there's also rumors that Apple might make a 13-inch MacBook, which would replace the MacBook Air. And that would have at least a Retina display. That would be big for me. If it's a Core M3 processor, though, a Core M5, Core M anything, I can't. There's no way. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm going to wait.
I'm curious because that MacBook is absolutely beautiful, but
yeah, it needs to be bigger.
It needs to be bigger and it needs to be a little bit faster, right?
Yeah.
So you can't even load up.
Not interesting. Not interested in making lemonade and explaining how it's a little slow for us, but you get used to it.
Yeah.
These guys always say, "Oh, I don't really notice it anymore." Well, of course you don't notice.
You don't notice it because
you just use the one computer. You don't understand what a piece of crap it is. It's I can't do that.
Yeah. All right, Paul. I think we're going to do a post show today.
Wow.
I think we are.
Is the post show going to be I play Call of Duty and you?
No, but it will be about video games.
Okay.
Because I recently got into retro gaming.
Oh, okay.
And I have been on this crazy kick where I'm playing all these because I'm a big fan of side-scrolling beat-em-ups.
Wow.
Like
side-scrolling
yeah, like that's my genre.
Like
I guess.
Street Fighter and stuff like that.
No, that's not a side-scrolling beat-em. Like Streets of Rage, Final Fight, games like that. I want to talk about that because I want to build a little retro box with all the games on there. So I want to keep that on the post show.
Raspberry Pi thing.
Yeah, like a Raspberry Pi, and I wanted to get people's input from the chat room if they've ever done this because I realize I'm terrible at new games, but I'm really good at these older ones. It's like muscle memory, right? This is what I know. This is how I do it. So I want to talk about that and a couple other things. But guys, if you're watching this live, stay tuned. The post show is going to be free. You can watch it. If not, go and subscribe to our Patreon page. I know a lot of you have been subscribed for a while. You could go there, go to patreon.com/whatthetech and subscribe for as little as $1 per episode, and it helps us out. $4 a month. $4. And you got another, 20 minutes of me and Paul. And it allows us to keep doing this, That's the whole point of it. The bonus show, you're paying for all of this. All right, guys, follow me on Twitter @AngelZane. You can follow Paul @Thurrott, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.